you ready to master the waves of medical device product development? Well, wax up your surfboard because you are listening to Inspired by Amua. And here is your medical device product development expert, that Hawaiian-hearted hostess who will help you hang 10, Megan Alonso.
Ikomomai and aloha. Thanks for joining us for another episode of InspiredByAmua.com. You can check out the website for any links that we talk about, any freebies that we talk about today. And wanted to introduce my next guest. He has been in the medical startup industry for over 12 years now, specializing in very early stage companies. So early that his highest employee number to date has been employee number 7 at these companies. He's had a successful $600 million exit, and now he's working to apply that knowledge and experience to help other early stage companies thrive and grow their company around the technology they have. So his company is Medico Ventures, located in Phoenix, Arizona, and they specialize to help physicians and other medically oriented ideas move forward and create companies around their technology. So welcome, Aaron Call. Aaron, are you ready to hang 10?
Yeah, great. Let's do it. Thank you for the introduction.
You're welcome. So I know one of the first questions that people are going to ask is, why Phoenix?
Yeah, great question. Phoenix is a hotbed of hospitals, physicians, a lot of medical activity. A lot of people come here to retire. And so there's a lot of medical activity here. And I grew up in Phoenix. I, love this area. My family's here. And when I graduated from Arizona State University in biomedical engineering, I knew that I was either moving to California, Minnesota, or the Boston area, Massachusetts. Ended up moving to Boston in the Massachusetts area and learned a lot in the early stage startup realm by doing so, but wanted to come back to Arizona. And when I did, I looked up all the early stage startup companies in the medical device space in Arizona. All 3 of them started knocking on their doors to try and join one of them, and was fortunate enough to do so. And as I did that, I realized that, man, this is a hotbed for medicine, and there's a budding entrepreneurship aspect here. And so why not continue to grow medical device startups here and stay in the early stage field of medical device startups that I love and stay in Arizona? So that's kind of a long explanation as to why we are in Phoenix with this.
Well, and although I love Boston and Cape Cod during the summertime, I would definitely say that Phoenix has better weather year-round.
That's true.
If you can deal with the hot.
Yeah, we're good for about 8 months out of the year, but those 4 are brutal.
Yeah, I guess that's when you can go back to Boston.
There you go. There you go.
So why did you start Medico Ventures? So you were working with these startup companies in Phoenix. What led you down the path to start helping other companies with their startups?
Yeah, so we really saw a primary need where in my past companies, we worked with a lot of physicians that really knew, the clinical side of the market and how a device should be developed from the clinical perspective. And we ran into a lot of physicians that had a lot of ideas, but those ideas in a vacuum with a physician running it by himself or some other entrepreneur running it by himself just didn't seem to go anywhere really well. And so we said, all right, there's got to be a way that we can use our expertise from the startup early stage entrepreneurship side of things to help these ideas move forward faster, more efficiently, so that they're not spinning their wheels, wasting their time, wasting their energy, and moving towards a goal that may or may not exist.
Mm-hmm. Which ties in perfectly with the name of my company and show, Amua, which actually means to move forward. So that's great.
Absolutely. I agree.
So in what role do you help these companies right now?
So we really have 2 sides to our business. One side is more dedicated towards what we call co-ventures. And that is a physician comes to us with an idea, and we really like that idea. He has probably put a good amount of work into it, maybe has some IP under his belt, maybe understands the market well enough, but doesn't have that rounding off team really. And so we partner with them, create a company around that idea. We vet all of our work with outside investments and move the company forward, take an integral management position. The other side of our company is just strictly services. And so an individual maybe just has a napkin sketch, just barely getting started on the process. We might engage on an hourly or contract project basis to help to move some things forward to where they could potentially become a co-venture or could potentially raise outside funds. And then we also do that for early stage startup companies where we contract with them to accomplish various aspects and projects that they might need help with.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of needing help, we've talked about this before, and actually my last guest on the show talked about different ways to leverage your IP. So once you have the IP, the typical not to do is just to run with that and develop a product. I know your company really stresses market research and understanding the market. So tell me more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It seems like times have changed where, a decade or two ago, you could go get IP, really get a really strong blocking patent and solidify your position in your invention, and then just license that and make some good, decent money off of that. But, in the past 10 years or so, something that I've really learned is that that really doesn't happen very often anymore. And so while IP is very, very important, and one of the key criteria that we look at actually, it's not your only competitive advantage. And you really have to put a lot of different criteria together and piece it together to really build something that meets the market. And so that's why we start with the market. We start with the problem. What is the problem that we're trying to solve here? And then come up with solutions, technologies that can address that unmet need and make sure that fits in with IP, within reimbursements, within clinicals, within the investment strategy, a whole gamut of criteria that we call fundability criteria that really helps an idea move forward these days towards eventually becoming acquired and worth something more than it is today.
Mm-hmm. So when companies come to you, do you help them with that early stage market research, or do you want them to be done with that, or maybe you just give them some homework?
Absolutely. I mean, so we...
or all of the above.
Yeah, all of the above, really. We've built a process around being able to do this efficiently. And so when people come to us, they're obviously at various stages of the game. As one physician might come to us, he has issued patents. He's spent, a good amount of time and money developing the market. He has maybe some customer validation aspects. And we start to jump in and create a strategy as to how to move forward, for instance. And then another physician or entrepreneur might come to us and really just has an idea. Maybe he's looked into getting a patent or prototype. And we typically try to say, all right, let's take a step back. Let's look at the market holistically. Let's look at the market size, your competition, and that sort of thing. And so it really depends on the stage that they're at, but we can jump in and help with any of that for them, with them.
Mm-hmm. Good. So tell me some stories. Give me some examples of companies that you've worked with in the past.
Yeah, I'll give you an example or two of kind of a negative aspect, and then maybe an example or two of something that worked out well. We had a couple physicians come to us a couple of years ago, and about a year ago actually, and they said to us, and I explained to them what we did, and they're like, "This is perfect. We have an idea. We have a patent. We just need to commercialize it and sell it." And I internally kind of smile because we get that comment quite a bit, and said to them, "All right, let's take a look at it, see what we have." They had spent about $20,000 to $25,000 trying to get a patent because there's this belief out there that you get an issued patent, you can license this or sell it, and you're golden. And like I said previously, I think times have changed a little bit. And so we dug a little deeper into it and said, and found out that they had received their final rejections on the patents that they were trying to prosecute with the USPTO, which, in and of itself isn't fully wrong, and there's ways around that. But as we started diving into the market under contract with them and started defining the market for them and defining, okay, what is the exact problem that we're solving here and who's going to buy this and what is the reimbursement for this, the product started to take a much different shape than what they had originally conceived. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, what they originally conceived and spent, tens of thousands of dollars on for prototyping really didn't have a market to be sold in. And so unfortunately, that product that they had conceived didn't move forward at all. And so that's one example of kind of the negative side, where they thought they had a great idea. They spent a lot of money on this, getting IP, but ultimately didn't move forward because they didn't bother to look at the market in a very detailed aspect. On a more of a positive note, we had a physician come to us, kind of similar situation, spent a bunch of money on some IP, and came to us and said, hey, we want to move this forward. So we engaged with him. And the first thing we did was we looked at the market. We looked at the market, the problems, and how his solutions hit those problems. And we started to see that what he had come up with was really interesting from a problem perspective, but that his invention didn't quite meet the need. And so we actually tweaked the invention a little bit. We ran a patentability search, and we were able to come up with something with him that was not only patentable again, but actually met the market demand. We had 3 issued patents within about a year, and then had started to shop those patents with some of the larger strategics, and had a lot of interest, and was able to build a prototype and show them, and actually had an offer to license the technology at that point. And so that's an example of a good outcome, where we had a product that we were able to tweak a little bit because we understood the market, that ultimately was more successful. And if you ask that physician, he'll say, hey, these guys helped me come up with something that's better than what I developed in a vacuum. And I like to believe that's what our company and what we've built with our processes can do.
Yeah, that's great. As long as people are open to that. I know sometimes you run into I've run into some personalities that they have their way of thinking, and it's difficult to change that. So I guess with them you offer your services, and if they want to do it, that's great. And if they're not into that, then they're just not for you.
Absolutely. No, that's very true. We spend a lot of time trying to tell people that we need to look at the market. We need to align. We need to get this product market fit. We need to look at competition. And it doesn't always come across as well as it should. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are some typical investment amounts that people can expect before Medico Ventures might partner with them? And again, what are some key steps? And I guess as a follow-on question to that, what are some key steps that they need to go through before they talk with you?
Yeah, great. So we've kind of laid this out a little bit, and we call it the ideation stage, where, the individual that comes up with an idea in the beginning is really the only one on board with that idea, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're working on it, trying to move it forward. They might talk to some people. They might do some internet searches and things like that. And that process, the ideation process, really needs to get to a point where we strongly believe that there's a problem that can be solved, that the solution that we've come up with, or that the inventors come up with, is really a great solution that meets all the fundability criteria, the 8 points criteria that we lay out. And so once we've kind of solved that and said, hey, all these criteria are really laid out well. There's actually a scale that we use, and it comes in at a decent score. Then that's something that we may be very interested in co-venturing with, in creating a co-venture with, and investing into. So that initial process, to answer your question, we think is somewhere between zero and maybe about $10,000 for the inventor themselves, that work that they need to accomplish before they could reach a co-venture stage.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really low barrier to entry if you think about it. Over the cost of developing a medical device can often be millions and millions of dollars. So to invest 0 to 10,000, that's a deal for sure.
Absolutely. And we look at this from the point of view that, yeah, it costs millions and millions of dollars, which means you eventually have to be fundable, which is why we actually call our worksheet Fundability Criteria Worksheet. And so it's all de-risking, adding value, and very incrementally, right? Mm-hmm. And so let's spend $100 here. Let's spend $1,000 here before we spend $10,000 or $100,000, and really go at this, with eyes wide open.
Yeah. So, and I want to come back to this, but I want to address it now because we keep talking around it. So there's the Fundability Criteria Worksheet. So stay tuned. I'm going to link to that later, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later and how you can access that and go through that worksheet on your own. But for now, so what about the validation? You talked about the ideation phase. So the next phase would be more of the valuation or validation of the idea. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the ideation stage, kind of checks the boxes on a lot of those criteria. And that really gets more than just the inventors saying that, yeah, there's something here. The co-venture stage is really designed to answer a key question or two or three. Maybe it's, okay, we need to build a dozen prototypes and get these into an in vivo animal study, for instance. Maybe it's we need to run a large customer validation study. It's something that's going to take a little bit more time, a little bit more money to get to a point where we can actually raise significant funds outside of what we've done to date. That stage we call the co-venture stage, and from our experience, anywhere between 10,000 to 150,000 can answer a lot of these key questions that they have, that then will align the entity, the technology, to be able to be really fundable by an angel or VC outside funds, because we've answered a lot of those key questions or de-risked a lot of those key questions.
Okay. And then when you work with companies, I imagine you have a few different structures. Like with some, you'll solely work on a consultative basis where they're paying you fee for service by the hour. But in other ways, you can actually, not only are you putting together a company around their technology, but you are a part of their company and you have an equity stake. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so last year we were working on a market research project with a group that was very interested in a particular space. And as we got into it a little bit further, we started to really come around to understanding, yeah, there's something here. At the same time, we were introduced to a physician that had an idea in that space. And so what we did was we really liked his idea. We added a few things to the idea that met the market more specifically, that made it a company that we could actually start. So with that physician, with some of the previous individuals that we were working with and with ourselves, we actually created a new entity, a new startup that had enough value in it based on all the different pieces that, the various players had brought to the table. And that company right now has reached a lot of great milestones with an initial seed round of funding, and is actually working on raising a larger round currently, and is moving forward and being very successful.
Okay, good. So speaking of fundraising, are you traveling a lot? Like, I know that Phoenix, as you mentioned earlier, is a hotbed for medical research, and there is a large retirement community there, so you have lots of patients there. But as far as fundraising, I just have in my mind that most of the venture capital you typically find in San Francisco or Boston. So are you courting those investors and traveling quite often?
Yeah, and that's a very astute point there, actually, because Phoenix is not a huge, venture capital rich area. And although there is activity here, there's angel groups here, great angel groups here. There's a lot of great high net worth individuals here, and we've been able to connect with a lot of these types that like to invest here. But we do spend a lot of our time in the Bay Area with some of the known entities, Life Science Angels, and some of the others that are there, that just understand the medical device and life science investment arena a little bit better, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things we have a hard time with in Phoenix is when we talk to a potential investor that's a high net worth individual here, they've invested in real estate, they've done well in real estate, but what do you mean I'm investing in a medical device that I may lose everything in?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to them. And so there is some education aspect. While we have some great circles here, we do connect with a lot of people in California and other areas of the country.
Good. And now our society is so global, so it is a lot easier to connect with them, even though you're not physically close with them.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, okay, we kept mentioning this fundability criteria worksheet. So you can actually download that worksheet if you go to emua-services or emua-services.com/fund, F-U-N-D, like the word fund for funding. So tell us more about this worksheet and what our listeners can expect, how it can really help them and other entrepreneurs in the medical or life science space.
Yeah. So when we first got into this and we started looking at a lot of different ideas, we said, okay, we need something a little bit more concrete of a process to evaluate these ideas and actually, put some numbers together as to how they compare between each other. And that was more strictly for us initially. And what birthed out of that was this fundability criteria worksheet where we looked at, okay, all the different aspects that need to come together to make an idea successful are included in this worksheet. And many of them are things that individuals either A, don't know how to research or understand further, or B, don't even know are the right question or that they should look into it. And so the fundability criteria worksheet lays out the 8 criteria, everything from customer validation down to reimbursement and regulatory aspects, IP, competition, technical feasibility, clinical feasibility. And it walks them through. There's some links in there. There's some questions saying, hey, fill out this table. If you don't know your classification from the FDA regulatory, here's a link to a database to find it, figure it out. So it helps you walk through all the different aspects of the criteria to begin to answer the questions yourself. And so we use it daily. We have internal employees that go through those criteria. And then we offer it up to anybody else, and everybody that downloaded have basically said, hey, thank you. This was very helpful in helping walk through answering the right questions and the process that is important. So it's been a very useful tool for us. And I'll just say one more aspect about it is that at the end, when you kind of score it, it really points out the items that are risks. And so if one area is a 0, that's a huge risk item. Let's go work on that. And maybe it's not IP. Maybe it's not a ProTech. Maybe it's talking to potential customers, right?
Yeah.
So let's go work on that and get that score moved up. And that's a lot of what it helps us do is identify the risks in a very methodical way, and then put a strategy together to actually add value and move it forward.
Good. So I mentioned where you can find that. You can actually, and I should have said, you can actually find it in 2 places. So the direct link is emua-services, that's imua-services.com/fund. But this will also be located on our show notes page. So what that is, if you go to inspiredbyemua.com, it'll pull up the latest episode. So if you're listening to this just after it goes live, that episode will be right up at the top. I think that wraps things up. Aaron, I just want to thank you so much for jumping on the podcast with us today and giving some amazing value to our listeners and just helping to point people in a direction of how to get started and navigating the waves of medical device development, because they can definitely be rough and filled with white water for you to get caught in if you don't know the direction that you're heading.
Absolutely. And likewise, thank you. Thank you for what you've built to kind of be a sounding board for these type of things.
Oh, you're welcome. And I look forward to working with you a lot more in the future.
Likewise. Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome. I hope you got major value out of this podcast, and I just want to hear your comments. I want to hear what you're struggling with and anything that you find is really helpful. So I have a great resource for that. It's called our Ohana, which means family in Hawaiian. So you can join our Ohana. You can go to facebook.com and search for the Inspired by Amua group, and that can serve as a forum for us to just chat back and forth and share these stories, share tips, share resources, and tell me what you want to hear more about. I look forward to giving you some great value next time, and until then, Amua!
Mahalo for joining us. If you're new to riding the waves of medical device product development, or if you've been in development for a while already, Inspired by Amua is here to surf with you. Want to be a master of the waves? Text HANG10, that's HANGTEN, to 44222. We'll send you the most common wipeouts companies make in product development so you can avoid them and reach master wave status. Again, that's HANG10 to 44222. We publish a new episode every Tuesday, so catch us at inspiredbyamua.com. Amua!